I was at a party in Soho one evening, and it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was living so far away from my true nature. And I experienced a lot of interpersonal trauma from family, from some of my first intimate relationships that I just thought was sort of normal at the time, right? It was just like, oh, this is just how people show up. This is how they behave.
And what I find amazing is the number of leaders that we work with where there's so much negativity in their daily lives, which brings out their judgment as opposed to being discerning.
It's a practice of slowing down and just reconnecting to what I know is true. Can you detach from that seriousness and find the humor in everything? I was diagnosed with cancer, and that was kind of like, ooh, okay. I need to heal my trauma. I need to take a look at all of the belief systems I have that are probably untrue and revamp my entire way of living and being.
Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Elizabeth Rayner has joined me in the studio today. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. It's so great to be here. I appreciate the time you're taking to connect with me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your journey today and your story.
Yeah.
Why don't we start by just the audience understanding a bit more about who you are and where your current focus is.
Sure. So I have a number of decades in human capital is how I describe it. But it's been a really unique journey. I started out during the original dot-com boom working in tech and making way more money than I probably should have at 23, 4 years old. But I found myself in a situation where I really wanted to understand more about human behavior, not just about how humans would interact with each other and in those dynamics, but about the behavior behind how people show up. So fast forward 10 years later, I started doing coaching after I was doing a lot more of the executive search work because I really wanted to get more in depth into, I have a psychology background. I wanted to find out why people behave the way they do, because I was noticing, as a lot of people are these days, quite I want to call it dysfunctional, and that seems like it's dramatic, but there's a lot of dysfunctional ways of interacting in the corporate workspace, and especially in tech, that I found. I worked with very senior leaders. I was trying to understand what was the catalyst behind that type of action in interaction, in interpersonal relationships. So I dug further into that. Where I am now is I founded, I'm the CEO and founder of a startup called Sympatia Health, and we're working on transforming cultural narratives to help very senior leaders connect back to the truth of the indestructible ease that lives within each of us. I think we've forgotten, right? There's so much noise in the world. So we're helping very senior leaders connect back to that in service of creating an irresistible new story that counteracts the paradigm that has been prevalent for decades, maybe centuries, right? And that paradigm I speak of is the power over paradigm, very controlling, very dominating. What we want to see more of in the world is power within and power to. And we believe that's more life-affirming and transformative, and per your work, conscious, right? It's kind of like, when did we forget about that? How do we reconnect back to it to remember the truth of who we are? And I think senior leaders have a very big opportunity right now to be the catalyst to create those new narratives, to reestablish who we are and how we want to show up in our relationships, in our work, with each other, as our cultural identities and worldviews are being shaped again. And so that is the work that I'm doing. I'm also a board certified health advisor and executive coach to very senior women leaders. I think the feminine energy, which is in men and women, is a really important energy to bring forward in the world to be able to achieve all the things I've mentioned. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called The Heart of Now, which is a guest-led concept working with very senior thought leaders on how we can relieve ourselves from suffering. And that is the most fun journey I've been on so far. We've had some really great guests, and I'm learning a ton about different perspectives and lenses and modalities. Let's see. My current focus is, as I mentioned, quite simply, I believe there's an indestructible ease that lives within each of us that we've become disconnected from, that I'm trying to connect everyone, but mostly very senior leaders, to begin the paradigm shift.
And I understand that, because then if we do that with those senior leaders, they have the authority and the influence to then influence others. So, I get that completely. I'm already sensing the ease in our relationship here, which is lovely. So I'm looking forward to the spaciousness in this particular conversation. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing when you're not working, because you focused on the professional and the passion and what you're here to do. But when you're not working, tell us a bit about yourself there.
I am a parent to a 12-year-old boy, which has been my biggest learning in my life to date. And he's getting to the point now where he's like, I don't know, you're still kind of cool, but you're also very not cool at all. So I'm learning, not learning, but really practicing the art of letting go with him a lot and enjoying the journey and just watching him become his own person. He is wise beyond his years. He teaches me more than any other mentor that I've had in my entire life. And so it's just a really fun journey with him. I also am a professional chef and love to be in the kitchen, love to be out on farms, love to be outdoors in general. Years ago, I competed in many heated battles with the Iron Chefs on the Food Network, which was one of the most embarrassing and humbling experiences of my life. I really just love being close to nature. And I love working and getting to know people. I love building communities. I love just seeing people thrive and rediscover new ways of being in the world. So yeah, anything outdoors. I'm a big jokester. So I don't know. I like to laugh a lot. I don't take myself too seriously.
Excellent. I love my food too. So let's go to the professional chef question. So I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite dish to actually cook and physically cook? And what's your favorite dish to actually serve?
People ask me that question, and I can tell you, Andrew, it changes per day. Like my approach is based on new American food, and I live in California. And so I have the luxury of having the access to so much. And farmers markets abound here. I can get like really beautiful, different types of food. And so it just depends on the day. But New American, my cookbook that I wrote is based on the Burmese tea leaf salad, which a lot of people haven't heard of, but it has all the textures and flavors and, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, all the components in it that make a dish truly unique. And so anything that's the freshest and has all of those components weaved into it in perfect balance is what I love to cook and what I love to serve.
Super.
Yeah.
Now we have something in common in terms of what we're in service of. So I don't know, because we've not spoken about this, but what I'm guessing is with a lot of professionals in our industry, our curiosity in terms of understanding the psychology of leaders around us, where maybe we see different behaviors to what we're used to, leads us at some point to understanding a bit more about ourselves and our own inner journey. So share with us what it was from your background earlier in your life that maybe drove your early leadership style to earn all that money at a young age. And that will lead us on to how that changed over time.
Yeah, it's a great question. And one that I don't reflect on a lot. And so it was fun for me to go back to that again and be like, okay, what was the moment? I had a really idyllic childhood. I grew up I lived in the States. I grew up on the East Coast and the West Coast. I had a bi-coastal environment, which was really lovely. I also was bullied to no end from various aspects of my life. And I experienced a lot of interpersonal trauma from family, from some of my first intimate relationships that I just thought was sort of normal at the time, right? It was just like, oh, this is just how people show up. This is how they behave. I became very hyper aware of the domination culture at that time, where in hindsight, I look back and think, wow, that was something that really taught me and showed me how I don't want to be in relation. But those experiences were such a gift, because I found myself from that place jumping into the quote unquote not enough that we all face, right? Scarcity, lack, lack of love, lack of belonging, lack of safety, all the lacks. And that led me to kind of jump into this place of like hyper protection. I must polish myself. I must be this perfect version in appearance and accomplishment and grades and all of those things that matter in the meritocracy of the world that we live in, to be able to be okay. And that led to like the type A typical behavior of a senior leader, where I thought, I'm in charge. I need it my way. I control this ship, and people who aren't with me are against me, needing to compete constantly, wanting to prove and strive to be able to armor against any of those insecurities rising up. It was based in fear, essentially, right? Fear of myself, fear of others. It took me a long time to reconcile that, but I think that's how I showed up, and it got me pretty far until it didn't.
And that's very common. So I'm sure that people listening to this now either would have experienced this or will, if they've got those drivers from their background. So are you able to share a bit more in terms of that point?
Yeah, I was in New York on a project for a very big Bay Area consulting firm. I was opening a satellite office. I was running around with a lot of the quintessential Goldman Sachs crowd. It was, glamorous parties, all of the fun and elaborate, luxurious dinners. I was at a party in Soho one evening, and it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was living so far away from my true nature. And I had subscribed to this culture that was absolutely, in my mind, unhealthy, dysfunctional, not who I wanted to be. I wasn't treating people well. I was, like I said, I was kind of like stepping over to get to, like I said, which served me really well, but it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was making myself sick by not living in integrity and not living authentically, but I didn't even see it until that very moment. And that started a whole cascade of events for me. But essentially, when I moved back from New York to San Francisco, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that was kind of like, ooh, okay. I need to heal my trauma. I need to take a look at all of the belief systems I have that are probably untrue and revamp my entire way of living and being. And that was a long journey, but there was no other choice in my mind at that time than to immerse myself into something new and different and better for me.
And it sounds as though from what you said there, the actual event that hit you like a ton of bricks happened before you discovered that you had cancer.
Yeah. You're kind of in a room and it becomes slow motion and you're just like, wait, what am I doing? I don't know. Some people would call that an awakening of sorts, right? But it was just that undeniable, very clear shock.
Yeah.
Witnessing, like stepping out of my body and being like, where am I? What am I doing?
Yeah. And it's really interesting, and hopefully you don't mind me exploring this a bit more, but a lot of the people that come on this show and have had similar experiences, there's been an event like your event, the two events there. Obviously the cancer is a real reset, as you say, and right. I've got to live my life differently because I need to survive. So right. What advice would you give to people out there where there isn't an event in their life that forces them to review what it is they're doing and who they're being?
Yeah, I have to be honest, I don't love to give advice. I like to have people bring it out in themselves. I can share what I found useful.
Right.
And that was, I got really honest about how conditioned I was. Like I really saw it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I allowed myself to see it instead of, I think during that time, it was like, oh, go, 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 go. And the more that I would go, the more that I would avoid. I knew there was something underneath me that was like terribly fearful, but I didn't want to look at it because it was like, there's a lion in there, when actually it was something much sweeter. But I allowed myself, I almost insisted that I see. So that's what I did, is I got very, very honest with myself.
And at that point, how easy was it for you to ask for help once you saw it? Because it's not always easy to ask for help.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm not good at asking for help. I've gotten so much better, but the trauma created hyper independence, right? It was just like, oh, yeah. I've asked for help in the past and the answer has been no. Or the people that I trusted to give me help not failed, didn't show up in the way that I wish that they would have. So I started out trying to solve it myself, and I realized it was way bigger than I am. So I didn't, again, like I use the word choice quite a bit, but I don't think I had a choice if I wanted to do it properly to go it alone.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how many years ago was that? How the reset?
I was 28, so that was 2 decades ago.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And then tell us a bit more about the build from there. So you had the event, you saw it, you decided, you had to do something about it, and then you did it yourself to begin with, then got some help. Just tell us about the journey since then, particularly around, reinventing yourself in that way.
Yeah, I just dropped into a very deep state of awareness. That is something I think, again, if I can offer anything, that is the first step, right? You just have to become aware. Aware of how you're showing up, aware of the things that are not true for you any longer, aware of the belief systems that hold you back or push you into this place of power over, as I've mentioned. And it created by default space for me for an emergence of something new. I didn't know what this something new was. I was kind of in that liminal void, right? And that is, for me at least, that was a terrifying space to live. And it was like I'd wake up every day and be like, okay, here I am again. I was so good at controlling and directing my life and my leadership capacities that this was unknown to me. But it was a complete act of surrender, really. I started to try to detach myself from the profit-centric, domination-centric culture. I found new people to spend time with who were also on the same path and trajectory. And I realized with all that, it's like, we are so interconnected. We are all safe. There's no separation. There's nothing to prove. That was a big one for me. I was like, I am okay right here, right now, as is, even in all my messiness. There's nothing for me to prove. And there's nothing wrong with me, with the way the world is right now. It is. And how much can I just savor it and devour it and allow it to be true? And then, I think you probably have had this experience too from your background. I started to lead from intuition more than my mind, right? I dropped more into my body. And that led me to a much more curious place instead of hard charging. And I know all the answers. And if I don't, then I'll figure it out, but I will never tell someone I don't know. I was more permeable. And that told me that I was healing my trauma, because with trauma, right, we're armored. So it's like when you become more curious and effervescent and permeable, that was the cue. It's like, this is working.
What I'm curious about here is you had these new people around you that could support you in this to be like that. What about the people that were already around you from the past, who you wanted to have around you, so family, loved ones, friends, but actually were seeing you go through this change? Sometimes that's very hard for people to accept that you're changing. Just talk to me about how that worked for you.
Yeah, I lost a lot of people during that period of time, and that was okay, because at first it wasn't okay. At first it was more trauma, right? It was like, wait a second, what do you mean? But I then came to understand through the process that not everybody is ready to experience that with you, and that is okay. And I don't have any ill will towards anybody. I feel like, okay, again, it's like that art of surrender, where if you're not comfortable with how I'm shifting and changing, then we're not meant to walk this part of the path, and perhaps we'll connect again. But yeah, that was part of it, right? I think that when you create that spaciousness, there's loss, quote unquote, in general terms, and learning to be okay with that. I think that's part of the work.
I don't know if you can relate to this, but on my journey where I was creating the spaciousness, I almost wanted to, because the value I got from it and how it felt for me in terms of more being rather than doing, particularly people close to me, I wanted them to experience that in the same way because I could see they would benefit from it so much. But then I learned very quickly that I couldn't do that, so it's really interesting to your point that they'll be ready when they're ready. And if they're not, it's, as you say, it's as it is.
Yeah, I did experience that. And it was funny because I found myself again, I'm like, this is a different type of striving. This is a different type of control. I want everybody to, because I think per your comment, once you start to operate in that spaciousness and that awareness, it feels so good. Like for me personally, I can access joy so much easier than I could before, right? It's just like there's an osmosis, right? And I see a lot of people suffering unnecessarily, maybe, but again, it's their journey. You just want them to fast track it because you care. Yeah. And you also, it's kind of lonely to go through that process. You're like, please come on this side, not this side, but just like enter this space with me and play.
Now, those listening and watching this will be familiar probably with Shirzad Shamin's work around the saboteur model. And what I find amazing is the number of leaders that we work with where there's so much negativity in their daily lives, which brings out their judgment as opposed to being discerning. What is it that you're still aware of in terms of your saboteurs that when we're tired and we're feeling anxious or that still kick in that you have to manage effectively?
Yeah, it's a good question too. It's a practice of consistent daily awareness. Again, I mean, I don't want to simplify it, but I love to simplify life right now because I think we complicate a lot. So for me, it's a practice of slowing down. When I am in a rush or when I am stressed, the saboteur is like right there. You suck, you're not enough, all the things that from before, right? It's a practice of slowing down and just reconnecting to what I know is true. That is antiquated for me. And I can tell the difference now. It did take time to have that discernment of what was antiquated versus what's true. But it was more of like, how do I act as a witness to my experiences and my interactions? I get triggered all the time still, right? But then I just slow it down. It's like, okay, triggered. And sometimes I have to excuse myself from the situation to be able to come back and have the right response. But I feel like if I show up in my interactions with radical, and I use that word by design, honesty. Like, hey, I'm feeling triggered right now. I don't know how I'm going to reply to this. I'm going to be right back. Mm-hmm. It allows other people to do the same, right? We all know that. So radical honesty, authenticity, integrity, that to me is like non-negotiable. And then kindness towards myself and other. Like if I have the respect enough for myself to say, ooh, I'm triggered and this is kind of not feeling so great. That's also a respect to other. So, and I think also per your comment earlier, I still have a really great support network around me of trusted partners that I go to regularly and do deeper work with because I feel like it doesn't end. You don't ever lose the saboteur. I mean, some people might, right? But I don't have that experience. I don't plan on that. I don't need to have that experience. It's a constant teacher for me whenever it comes in. It's like, ooh, how am I going to handle it this time? Here it is. Yeah.
And at the start of the show, you talked about what it is you're passionate about now. At what point did you decide that's what you're going to spend the next few years being in service of?
I read a quote by Gus. Do you know who Gus Speth is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's the former dean of environmental studies at Yale. And this is a quote that's been circulating around for a very long time. It hit me like a ton of bricks. And I actually heard it I did a trauma recovery program and global mental health through Harvard Medical School, which was a beautiful program, by the way. If you ever get the chance to take it, it was just, it weaved in so many different components of what I'm talking about. But he said, I used to think the top environmental issues were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change, but I was wrong. And he said the top environmental issues are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And basically, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it was, that's an issue. It's a spiritual and cultural issue that we scientists do not know how to solve. And that's true. And that's okay. But for me, I was like, I would raise my hand. I would like to solve that. I would like to work on that, because I think that is really selfishness, greed, and apathy are what I've seen in my entire career as hurdles to well-being and happiness. Really, you can't show up in that way to me and be happy at the same time. Those two they can't coexist. So that kind of just was like the light bulb. Yeah.
Brilliant. And this might not resonate, but it might. I don't know. It's something I certainly felt when I started my journey. Did you ever notice recently, or in the past, the weight of responsibility that we put onto ourselves when we're in service of this kind of work? Have you noticed that appear at times?
When you said that, Andrew, it reminded me of going back to like bringing everyone else along on your journey. Like, please come over here. This is so great. I sometimes I do. And then other times I feel like I can't force any of this on anyone. I'm going to show up and embody what I believe to be a way that could maybe potentially help some people. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. And if they're ready, they're ready. And if they're not, they're not. Right. So it's it takes a lot of that off. I don't want to carry any backpack. No, that's a good question though. I mean, it does creep in.
But it's also getting used to, and again, you've been on this journey, so I'm not saying it's easier, but I can understand why it could be, where people are saying, no, don't understand what you mean, and it's just a case, as you said, that's just the way it is, and getting used to that early on when you've got so much passion and a fire to make a difference, because you can be frustrating at times.
And yeah, it can be really frustrating, and most people, I have to say, don't understand. And I've been called, outspoken, outland, like crazy, all the things, right? Like, what are you talking about? Just do the stuff that everyone else does. It's like, okay, I have done that, and this is my new thing. So, but most people, they don't, and that's okay. And they might not ever, and that's okay too.
So let's talk about inner work. And you're at the stage of your life now, and giving this. What's left for you in terms of stretch, in terms of both inner leadership and the way that you lead this movement?
It's just a constant practice. I mean, there's nothing really to do other than be what I'm saying I want to be, right? So it's continually letting go. Everything is uncertain. I have to just let it go. Show up every day, do the thing, let it go, right? I practice yoga a lot, and that's such a good, after I do the pose, sometimes it's painful as all get out, and then I let it go, right? I continue to heal the wounds. The wounds keep showing up, right? They're not going away. They're there. We all have them. And I think the more that we admit that we have them, the more likely it is that we'll actually get to the place I'm hoping we get to. It's normal. It doesn't mean you're flawed, right? So that's my continuous work too. Detaching from the noise right now is something I think is very important for me. I don't subscribe to a lot of mainstream stuff just because I can't do it. It really dysregulates my nervous system. And so I try to take in and consume what feels appropriate to my journey. And I think that's a great practice for everyone, right? And it's different for everyone. And then, like I said, just practicing innate self-compassion and self-respect. And when I say self-compassion, a lot of times people are like, I have no idea what that is. And that just breaks my heart, right? But that's the only way to do the inner work, right? It's like, oh yeah, I fell down again today, big time. Look at that. And then I'm going to try again tomorrow. Instead of, I can't believe I haven't made more traction. I can't believe I'm still here. So really it's just, as I mentioned, it's writing the new stories for myself and hoping that eventually others will come along on the journey, because from my experience, being over in this section that I'm sitting in now is incredible. And it's not easy, but it's worth it.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to come back to something you mentioned earlier because we've not talked about it yet.
Yeah. What
is it that really makes you laugh? If you have that free belly laugh where, you just need to have a good laugh and let go, what is it that makes you laugh the most?
I love just when people can laugh at themselves mostly, right? It's just this human journey is the funniest thing. My son makes me laugh tremendously because he's just silly and doesn't even care. He has no attachment to being any certain way. He's just free and open and honest. And I think when we can look at ourselves from that lens of like this, we don't need to take this so seriously. This is actually really funny. The whole human journey is very, very funny. So it's like, how do you, can you detach from that seriousness and find the humor in everything? It exists, right? And that's how the joy enters, is from that place of just being like, it's fine. It's all okay. We're safe. I also love silly slapstick humor. I just think it's sometimes, if delivered correctly, it's all about timing, right?
Absolutely. And I've been trying to get my kids into Laurel and Hardy, and they're my favourite slapstick characters. But because it's black and white, they think this is so old, but actually, in terms of looking at something that's quite really good timing, it's Laurel and Hardy for me. So.
Right. Yeah, my dad got me into that at an early age, and I had the same hesitation with the black and white. But then when you get in, it's smart. It's funny. It's smart. It's just, again, it's like poking fun of the things that we all take too seriously.
So final question for you today. I really enjoyed our time together, but because you've got a very clear vision about what it is you're here to do, and we know that not everybody's ready to go on that journey with you, but some people will be. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you or collaborate with you, at least reach out to you? What's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, I mean, connecting through my website is great. Sympatia Health, Sympatia Health.com. Checking out the podcast is always fun, right? We've had some really amazing guests on, but connecting with me directly through that source is great. And yeah, I mean, I'm really just here in service of anyone who's curious, checking out some of this work. And yeah, it's fun. It doesn't have to be scary. And I think the people that have gone through it have said, oh, wow, okay, yeah, we can have a good time with this and make some progress along the way too. So it's, that is the best place to catch me, is on my website.
Great. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. I know all the listeners out there, all the viewers would have gained something from today, and something will resonate, which they can take away and put into their lives when they're ready. That's the important thing. Yeah. So once again, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for being on the show.
Thank you, Andrew. So nice to connect with you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.